This show is sponsored by the Comics Shop. We hope you enjoy the show.
G'day and welcome to a pre-recorded version of Tuesday Chinwag. So Tuesday Chinwag is sponsored by the Comics Shop, and my name is Lee Chalker. I'm the creator of the Australian independent comic book Battle for Bustle, available at the sponsor comics.shop. The show is streamed across two channels. One is the Comics Network, which is a comics-based community for all like-minded people. It has live streams, it has a publishing wing, and it has the community base. So everybody is welcome that has a love for the medium. We are also broadcast across Aussieverse, which is an Australian organisation community that loves all things comics and pulp. They do pop, I should say, well, pulp, even pulp fiction. There you go. And they do interviews, they do hauls, they do plenty of video content, going to comic book conventions, etc. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful that the show can go across both of those. The best thing you can do for both of those channels is to like and subscribe. Now, they are across Facebook, they are across YouTube, which is the most important because of its algorithm. They are across TikTok, and they are across Facebook. Now, I have a very, very special guest today, and the reason why it is pre-recorded is that my guest, Mr. Matthew Schofield. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, Lee. I'm good. How are you?
I'm rocking, mate. I'm good to go. I'm very happy to meet you. Now,
same.
Today is a Saturday. We're pre-recorded, and where Matthew is in Los Angeles is a Friday. So I did a few pre-recorded shows last year, and for some particular reason, I fell into the habit of giving a weather report. So I'm going to continue with that. So today in North Queensland, Townsville, where I am based, it is February the 10th, 2:41 p.m. in the afternoon. The air quality is good. It is partly cloudy, and it is 35 degrees. So for any of you interested, there you go. For any of you that aren't, there you go. So for anyone that hasn't seen the show before across both channels, Tuesday Chinwag is a show based on who, what, where, when, how, and why. Sometimes we get through all of these questions, sometimes we do not. The show is fluid. So it's about getting to know the story behind the creator that is on the show with me, and basically just having a good time, having a yarn, and just, in a long form, relaxed interview, seeing all things happening in their world, how they got there. So Matthew Schofield, it is a pleasure today, mate. Now, we were talking briefly at the beginning of the show, and before we get into the deep existential questions of it all, mate, I was wondering, how is it in Los Angeles, and what's the weather like there right now?
Weather here right now is cold because it's winter, and it's February, so winter over here is from gets cold in December and then goes all the way through to February. March is still pretty cold. So yeah, it was quite cold today, and we've just had like a week of pretty torrential rains. They had an atmospheric river that hit Los Angeles and caused flooding in a lot of areas. So it was fortunately where I live in the city is I live on sort of the side of a big hill.
Yeah.
So we're not really subject to flooding because the water just flows down the hill. Yep. So that was good.
So my question to you, man, straight up, before we do get into the existential questions, is because I'm not a weatherman,
neither am I.
Well, this might go nowhere, this question, but let's try anyway.
Okay.
An atmospheric, what did you say?
They call it an atmospheric river, and
right.
I don't know exactly what that means.
Is that a real thing?
It felt pretty real.
Well, that'll do, mate. That'll do.
rain
That's the
felt
best
pretty real.
definition you can give. It felt
Yeah.
real. So I'm happy to roll with that, Matt. Like I've never ever heard of an atmospheric river before.
But yeah, sorry, I can't really explain it to you in sort of the meteorological science terms or anything. I just hear on the news like, oh, an atmospheric river is going to hit Los Angeles next week, and I'm like, oh, okay, well,
yeah, right.
Whatever that. You just, it just means like a lot of rain and storm kind of conditions,
It's funny how they've always got to come up. It's like one bureau's out doing another bureau. You know what I mean? Like it's an atmospheric river, and over there it's I don't know, a celestial monsoon, and like some other area of the world is something else. Like
when I first moved to LA, and it's sort of a bit of a joke amongst LA residents, but when I first moved here, I was really struck by how because it doesn't really rain that much in Los Angeles, and the roads are made for dry conditions, and so when it does rain, and if it rains a lot, potholes start to form and the roads get slippery. And so, it's always chaotic here when it rains, and the news like bulletins, like they'll do these on the local news. You'll see like Storm Watch 2024, like they'll do like a big graphic comes on the screen, and they're all, I thought that was bizarre when I first moved to LA back in, I moved here in 96. And I just thought, coming from Brisbane, which is where I spent the first 20 plus years of my life, where we get more tropical storms every summer and all that. So I think, Queensland people are much more used to weather, but than Los Angeles people. So yeah, it was always like, it's raining, newsflash, it's raining. So
Well, it's rain. I mean, it's raining up here in Townsville because someone could throw out a dirty bucket of mop water on the street, and you'll get like 60 people in their fast cars all trying to do skids in it. So it's you can smell the burning rubber in nearly every street, man, as it wafts over. Someone's left the tap on again. But it's what you do up here, I guess, if you're that way inclined. So Matthew, we are. Mate, we're already off and running, but I'm gonna, mate, for anyone out there watching that doesn't know you, who
am I? Okay, so my name's Matthew Schofield. I grew up in Brisbane, as I said, and I'm an animator by trade. I've worked in the animation industry since about 1995, and I started off working in Sydney, and then in 96 I was lucky enough to get a job over here in Los Angeles on a feature film called Cats Don't Dance, and so then I worked on a couple other animated feature films, worked on The Iron Giant and Prince of Egypt and Quest for Camelot. And then after Iron Giant, I moved on to The Simpsons. And I've been on The Simpsons ever since. So I still work on The Simpsons. It's going to be my 25th year on the show this year. So yeah, pretty crazy to think about that I've been on the same show for 25 years, because in the animation industry, that, as you can probably guess, that's sort of unheard of to have any show go on for that long. So I feel really lucky to be where I am and be doing what I'm doing. And I also have loved comics since I was a kid. I had my first comic purchased for me when I was about 7. I was thinking about that today. and I must have been 6 or 7 because I knew how to read it myself. I didn't have, so I was already reading. So I just have loved comics ever since. I got into comic collecting hardcore when I was in grade 8. So that was 1985.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty, like, as you would know, like 1986, that's like one of the pivotal years in modern comics, right? Because you had Watchmen, Killing Joke, Dark Knight Returns, and Batman Year One all come out around that time. So,
absolutely.
I've been collecting since then. I haven't stopped. I've only just shifted what I collected, but I have tons of comics in my garage. I don't even know how many. Just boxes and boxes and boxes of comics.
So you took them all with you from Brisbane on your journey?
No, I have gradually brought like whatever could fit in like half a suitcase every time I would go back to visit my family.
Yeah.
Because my collection from when I was in Australia, I left that there at my mum's place in her garage.
Yep.
And so every time I'd go back to visit, I would be like, oh, do you know where you put, like, there was a box and it looked like this that had my West Coast Avengers and my Phantom comics in it. And so I want to find those. And my mum would be like, oh, I think, come down to the garage and we'll have a look. And so then we would, like, literally every time I go back to visit, I would be like, can we just look in the garage? Because I'm sure there's still something that I haven't brought back, even like, because I was just there at Christmas and now my mum's sort of, it's almost like I've indoctrinated her into, like, she was like, I think you've still got comics down in the garage. And I was like, no,
she might be sick of the 25-year journey of having to move the bloody boxes around, mate.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, no, Mum, I actually do think I've got them all now. Like, I don't think there's anything left. But she was like, oh, I don't know. I think we should have a look. And I was like, hey, I don't mind looking because you never know. Like, we might find some treasure down there that I'd forgotten about. We didn't find any. So I think I finally have brought all my comics over here. And then, I've been buying comics since I've been here too. So it's just, and then my wife, she collected comics when she was in her late teens, early 20s. So then when we got married, our collections merged. It's like, oh my God, we just got so many. So
do you have moments? Does your wife still share the passion with you of having a little look through the back issues and stuff?
No, she's like, can you stop buying? Because I'll be like, we've got no space in this house anymore, and she's like, well, I'm not the one buying comics every week, so
well,
who's to blame for that? And I'm like,
as long as you're not like using them to prop up legs on tables and like the old
no, we're not quite.
You're watching tally, mate. Like got the feet propped up on the old, I don't know, your box of Uncanny X-Men or something. I told you there'd be a use for these one day. Like you never know.
Not quite at that stage. It's not like, I don't want to give you the impression that it's like a hoarder's house where it's just like stacks of stuff that you got to like move around through that when you're trying to get to the bathroom or whatever. It's not like that.
Or were you giving us that impression and realised and thought I'd better throw this bugger off the scent and tell him that it's not?
Yeah.
Oh, mate. Hey, close to finding out about what goes on in Matthew's house there.
Very close.
Yeah. What was your favourite comic book back in the... Oh, actually, what was your first one, man? There you go. What was the first one?
So my first comic was, I still remember vividly going to the local newsagents, and it was sort of, down the road from our house. And my dad bought me a Mighty Mouse comic and a I think it was issue 24 of The Man Called Nova, you know, the Marvel comic.
Yep.
So I'm pretty sure it was issue 24. I don't know what number. The Mighty Mouse comic, I think, was one of those Gold Key comics.
Yep.
And I vastly preferred the superhero comic to the Mighty Mouse comic, even though technically, yes, Mighty Mouse is a superhero. Don't come at me, Mighty Mouse fans.
That's all right. Shane will get those emails and forward and vet them for you, mate, and forward them on to you at a later date.
Very good. So I never was really into like the funny animal type comics. Always was more into superheroes, and I think that came from watching the Batman TV show when I was really little, because that was on in reruns when I was 4 or 5, and so because I still remember being in preschool and playing Batman with the kids in the schoolyard, and watching that on TV every afternoon at 4 o'clock, and then also the Super Friends cartoon. That was another early thing that I was like, oh, superheroes, and so I just always have loved superheroes from an early age.
That's
and
cool.
that was.
Do you remember that awesome? Would have been a similar period. That really, really cool Flash Gordon cartoon that used to get around on like ABC. Man, how good was that show? That was awesome. I've always, I see you can find them on YouTube and stuff here and there now too. I like to have little flashbacks to my childhood every once in a while. Matt. So
I think we all do.
Yeah. Take me back to, because man, that was so cool, that cartoon.
That was. It was a really well done cartoon. Just to have like a Flash Gordon cartoon, but it was in the style of the original comic strip. It wasn't like the Sam Jones Queen soundtrack movie.
But I still love that movie. I still love that movie.
That movie is awesome.
I know. It's like I've watched that with people only in the last couple of years, and there's a couple of movies that I really enjoy from that era, and I've sat down and watched them, and within about 2 or 3 minutes at the start of the film, like you're getting the whole, you can feel the stare at the at the side of your head, like they're like, what are we watching? You gotta trust me, man. You gotta trust me. I loved this stuff when I was a kid. You're like 45 now, man. I'm not picking up what you're putting down, but you just, it's the sheer enthusiasm that drives you through it, man. But no, I do like those sorts of things. But did you find that when you bought Nova and you were talking about superheroes, did you find that it was like the intergalactic cosmic sort of superheroes that appealed to you more, or did you like the grounded dudes, like your Captain Americas and all that sort of stuff?
I think I was, I never really liked the cosmic stuff. That's something even to this day, like I don't really like the DC cosmic stuff. I'm cool with, because a lot of that came from Jack Kirby and the Fourth World stuff, but the Marvel cosmic stuff, I haven't really developed an appreciation for it. But to be fair, like I've never tried to dive in. I will say that as a kid, that stuff never reached out to me and grabbed me. I was more into, like, when I first started collecting, I was getting West Coast Avengers, X-Men, and like Justice League, the Giffen, DeMatteis, Kevin Maguire Justice League. those kind of books. And then I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Oh, just you were talking about the whether you're interested in the cosmic side of comics, which you aren't, but then you veered off into the more grounded.
And then the street level grounded characters. You know, I did like Daredevil. I really liked Daredevil as a kid. But I was never really wasn't a fan of Captain America. Strangely enough, I was a big Batman fan where I was really little watching the TV show, but then wasn't into the Batman comics at all, except for those event ones, you know, like Dark Knight Returns and Killing Joke and Batman Year One. And I only got those because I had a friend at school who, looking back, had excellent taste in comics. Like he was the guy who was like, you got to read this Dark Knight Returns. You got to read this, The Killing Joke. And I was like, oh, but I like West Coast Avengers. You know, which was like, and I mean, like before John Byrne came on, this was like when it was Al Milgrom, inked by Joe Sinnott and written by Steve Englehart. And so like, I look back on those really fondly, but I pulled some of those old issues out recently and was reading through them and was like, these aren't very good, you know?
I've done the same because I got into comics through my dad and then veered off into my own range of comics. But when I was going through school, my friends and I and stuff, we all loved the X-Men world. I mean, there were others. Like I have a huge love and affection for Daredevil during that period as well. I think that's some of the most beautiful stuff you'll ever find. And we used to get to school early. We used to raid news agents on our bikes. You know what I mean? Like, man, don't worry about eating at lunch. You know what I mean? Like our lunch money, we'd pool it together to go and get, you know, like like the Fall of the Mutants together. And we used to pick, you know, like all of these places, you know, news agents and corner stores and petrol stations and stuff all used to have them on like spinner racks and that. And we used to raid them. And we'd smell them out too, you know, like we didn't get that issue of, you know, like the New Mutants, you know, like, oh, but it's at the mobile service station on Ross River Road. So, you know, I'm sure, you know, here the clerk was probably absolutely terrified of these, you know, 3 or 4 fat, you know, young kids riding their bike back in the early 90s, where now, you know, like they probably really are terrified. But and we used to pool them. But we cottoned onto the fact that other kids, their parents, because they'd come and sit with us, what is this you're reading? And, you know, like, oh, that's so cool, man, you know, like, and then, because, well, we were mildly business-minded, I suspect, you know, like back in the day, and we ended up cottoning on that the library, comic books back in the day, if we skipped the ad side of the paper, it had cost us 5 cents for a page to photocopy, right? So we used to make bootleg copies of the comic books, and we used to sell them to the other kids in the school. And we were like making some good money back in the day, man. You know, like man. We were like, you know, there was no like you know, there was no homemade, you know, like peanut butter sandwiches for us, mate. You know what I mean? Like it was the old top shelf sausage rolls and things. But then the librarian cottoned on to us, and we were, and librarians may work in a quiet place, but I think due to the quiet nature of the area in which they work, like there's a fire that burns in them, man. So when they get that opportunity to press the trigger, like it comes out like extra hot.
Right.
So
Like
I remember that. Oh, mate, I remember that scolding. Let me tell you, we got run out of that library. Yeah, so.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, that's just one of my little comic things. But no, I like the fact that you're around during that time because I was too, man. I think that was looking back on it for me. Often I've spoken to people about that 85, 86, 87 period was like really, really rich to me in terms of
absolutely.
My foundation of love for the medium, and cottoned on to the fact too. Hand in hand with that part of it as well, is that my dad was like a huge comic book enthusiast, and
Oh wow.
I'm lucky enough, man. I've got all of an awful lot of the original Marvel Amazing Spider-Mans and all that sort of stuff sitting in my
Really?
Yeah, they're not in great nick because some people, like there's collectors getting around the place that if they were to listen to that, they would have had the same reaction. But I guess to a certain extent, while I hold them with reverence, I'm a bit of an old school sort of guy, man. Like I actually like to read my comics. I don't like to whack them in slabs and stuff like that,
Yeah.
And those comic books were well read and well loved by, me as I was growing up. And so yeah, you I don't know. Dad and I'd have swaps, man. Like he wasn't a huge X-Men fan, but he loved Spider-Man. Where I also gravitated towards 2000 AD because I loved that, the Judge Dredd ABC Warriors, and you had your pop stuff, like which was Marvel and DC. But then 2000 AD, when I discovered them, had these like artists who were hand painting stuff and black and white. And it just blew my mind, and yeah, so it was a nice little fertile period there for a long while.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I'm glad you share a love of that lovely period.
And the other thing that, as you were talking about your experience of riding around to hit all the newsagents, was like that was also like the culture of comic for me and obviously you as well, was because I didn't even know comic shops were a thing back then.
Neither did I.
And at that time, there was one comic shop in Brisbane. I hadn't discovered it yet. So yeah, I was getting my comics the same way, just sort of going to the news agency whenever you had a chance. But there was a certain sort of magical element of treasure hunting doing it that way, because it wasn't like a comic shop where it's like, we order everything Marvel does, don't worry, we're going to have a copy of it. It was almost like, well, I don't know what the newsagent is going to have from week to week. I'm just going to go because I know they're going to have some comics. And so I almost think that was a more fun and magical way to begin comic collecting. I don't know what I'm going to get, but I hope I find something cool.
I'm 100% with you, because it was there was, you weren't always sure if you were going to hit the money. So the effort that it took to go out there was the adventure in itself, because it's like, and then like, 'cause some news agents at varying outlets would only sell a certain range and wouldn't sell titles, so you sort of in the end had to like navigate your way around to these places. Like if you wanted that title, you had to go, the other side of town to get it. If you wanted this, I don't have to ride that far this week. And then other times, oh man, there was just manic weekends and mornings before school where, and look, obviously being an alcoholic, I obviously started with an obsessive nature as as a young kid, looking back on it. So yeah, there were times where I'd get home from like a 3-hour mission, to find all these comic books, man, and smack them all out, like read them, like in 3 or 4 hours. And then mum would be like, where are you going? And I'm like, I'm going back, like in that day, I'm off out again trying to get more comics, because you had to leave some soldiers behind, mate. You know what I mean?
I couldn't carry them all. Yeah.
And it used to break my heart, like, no, like crying your way home, man. Even though you had this beautiful swag, you still couldn't take some of them home. So, that was... they were good memories, Matt. Like, I'm glad we talked about that because I hadn't thought about that side of things in a long time. Because while the local comic book shops are beautiful, to go in and there's such a plethora of range and things like that, there was a real, particularly in a small town like Townsville at that time, you know what I mean? And Brisbane, was the same back when I was a little boy going down to Brisbane. I mean, it was big, but it wasn't where it's at now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, much smaller and sleepier back when we were kids. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Did you hit book exchanges? I imagine you would have.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mate, did I hit book exchanges? Oh, my God. Yeah, I sure did. And that's something that I genuinely wholeheartedly miss.
Me too.
Book exchanges. Like the first comic book shop, it was the second. There was one they tried up in Townsville in the early 90s. And, it was a bloke. It was called the Looney Bin. And... which was probably aptly named, to be honest with you. And knowing all of us, that like drawing and art and comics and stuff. And I can't remember what his name was, but he decided to get in comic books. And it was pretty cool at that stage because he was getting in T-shirts and things like that. And T-shirts, remember back in the 80s and 90s, Marvel and DC used to put those checklists and stuff in the back, and there'd be T-shirts, and there's the famous like Wolverine diving out of the T-shirts, those sorts of things. And you used to look at them as a kid and go, "Oh man, I wish I'd get one of those T-shirts," you know?
Right.
I mean? And this dude used to like stock them, so he was cool like that. He didn't have a huge range of comic books, and then he just went out of business. So it was back to the back to the newsagents and stuff. And then a really old lady who, look, to be honest with you, at that stage, when I was young, she seemed old. But having said that, mate, she was probably our age. So I'm gonna tone that back there. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes. She
was, she was a lovely lady, and she had a book exchange with her husband, and she cottoned on to the fact that no one in Townsville was selling comic books and anime and manga and all that. So while she was selling, book exchange, like books, etc., she decided to just throw it open to like comic books and things, man. And
that's cool.
And honestly, she started off with no idea about what it is, but then as everyone's collections were growing, her knowledge was growing. So she was pulling back issues from the wildest places, man.
Oh,
wow. Mate, like it, and wow, she did an amazing job. And I think there's a lot of people in Townsville that would be very thankful to her with their comic book collections, because I certainly am. That's the book exchange that I've mentioned before, where I discovered back issues that she'd got in of The Crow and stuff like that,
cool.
which, you know, like led me on to my infatuation with all things The Crow. And yeah, beautiful, magical.
That's
time,
really
man.
cool.
Yeah. I do miss those days, and well, I guess we're lucky looking back and having the opportunity to talk about that, you know, magic everywhere, man. And I wonder, hopefully kids in this day and age get to have their own forms of magic, mate, in whatever medium it is. So
yes, hopefully.
yeah.
The book exchanges are something that I really do miss, like, you know, because as I said, when I come back to Brisbane to visit every so often, and because visiting the local book exchange, you know, because I think there were like 2 in my neighborhood when I was a kid, and I could ride my bike to both of them. And so visiting those, like on a Saturday morning, I would just ride my bike to the newsagent and the 2 book exchanges, and like you were saying, you're doing your comic run kind of thing. And yeah, that was how I built a lot of my early comic collection, was finding just random back issues at the book exchange of just stuff that looked interesting. But, you know, like I was saying, like, you never knew what was going to be there. So it was, again, it was like a treasure hunt. And so every time I would go back to visit Brisbane, since living over here, I'd be like, you know, I'd ask my sister, like, can we go to a book exchange? So just for old time's sake kind of thing. And, you know, you never know what's going to be there.
Yeah.
But yeah, tried to do that at Christmas time, and couldn't find a book exchange in Brisbane.
Yeah.
So I know there must be one there somewhere, but I couldn't find one. So
man, it's sort of sad because one of the other book exchanges, because, you know, they were cool people that like owned book exchanges, you know, like all they do is sit there and read. They just love reading. So one memory now, because we're still talking about the magic of it, and that, there was this book exchange in a small arcade in the Townsville City Mall, and it was called Jim's Book Exchange. And Jim himself was a cool dude, right? Wouldn't say much, but every day he was super well dressed in a polo shirt, those a little bit half leg shorts, a belt, the schmickest runners you could ever see, man. You know what I mean? White as, like they never had a mark on them at all.
Okay.
Big mustache, gold necklaces hanging down like you wouldn't believe. The man, I'm surprised, didn't have a crooked neck. You know what I mean? Like, and he'd sit there reading these books, and you'd walk in, and you'd walk, you know, you'd be going through things, and he'd look you up and down, you know, making sure who you were.
Right.
And then you'd ask him a question. The things you're bringing me back to here, man. And you'd ask him a question, and he'd just look at you like, and this is what he'd do, man. And then he'd answer. And every time, man, I don't know whether he had a sinus infection or whether it was a nervous tick or what. It was like, and then he'd ask. And, you know, so as you can imagine, there are a few people a few of my mates, you know, like were a little bit uncomfortable going.
I know. I was going to say that sounds somewhat terrifying.
Yeah, and it was loud. Like, I'm not even giving the decibel level justice here, man. Like, I'm talking, like, you know, like, it was loud, man. And it was frightful the first time you heard it. I tell you, it was like, what is that noise? It sounded like someone was being, like, I don't know, like something was happening in the background of this shop, but it was just this dude, man. I don't know whether he was reading something funny or something struck him, in this not like fuck, but
Oh man, that's it's kind of scary.
Yeah, it was. It was, but I hadn't thought about Jim in a long time. Actually, I hope whatever happened to Jim, I don't know, but I'm sure he was a lovely man. But that's my everlasting memory of Jim and Jim's book exchange. But it is it is what it is. But the other beautiful thing about book exchanges were that comic books were cheap for kids. And
yes,
you wouldn't pay much more than 50 cents, 75 cents for a comic book. Where you get into the medium, mate, like where I know obviously printing, the medium has changed itself in the last very recent future, but or past, but time space interface, all that sort of jive. Where really are we living, man? 3D, 4D, or 5D dimension? These are really existential questions that someone else can answer, but we'll just bring it to the fore so people know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And pickles. And it was easy for kids to collect comic books and fall in love with them, where now it's even as someone that works and has partakes in the community and industry and stuff like that, it's you do have to be selective about what titles you want to follow, and sometimes the selectivity can even come into whether it could be the art, it could be the writing, it could be the characters, it could be the individuals that are creating the comic book as well that people gravitate towards. It seems that where when we were younger, we just had the opportunity to go, wow, I want to try them. Here's a stack, boom. And give them a shot. And if we didn't like it, we wouldn't go back. Or we'd continue on. So, like all things, I guess, things adapt and develop, and rainstorms become atmospheric.
Atmospheric rivers.
Rivers. That's it. Hey, now you partake, for anyone that's watching this show, underneath Matthew's name is steamrollerman.com. Now, this is also what we want to talk about, is as well as your animation, because there'd be a lot of people out there that'd be looking at me going, Lee, shut up and let the man talk about Lion John and the Simpsons. But we're getting to that. See, the trick is that you keep them hanging, man. You know what I mean? Keep them hanging.
I'm just following your lead.
I'll pop in and go, hey, get out of here in 15 minutes. You know what I mean? You want to keep them in. And no, but I shouldn't give too many tricks away. But mate, let's take you for a walk down your career and varying things and the experiences that you've had while being in the City of Angels and I guess the animation world and with Steamroller Man.
Sure. So you want to know about the comic first or animation stuff?
Absolutely anything, wherever you feel comfortable starting, mate. The show is fluid, so I am going to let you just fire away where you feel comfortable.
Okay, well, I'll talk about Steamroller Man first, I guess. So yeah, I've always wanted to draw comics. I started off wanting to draw comics for a living soon after I started full-on collecting comics as a 13-year-old, because around that time I realized, there's people who make these as their job. This is a job you can do. And you'd read in the back of the in the letter column and stuff, we're going to San Diego Comic Convention and next month, and artist John Romita Jr. will be at Comic Con, and I'm like, what's a comic convention? Well, that sounds cool. And so then so that's when I first started thinking I want to be a comic book artist as a job, but not knowing how to do that or what, like I started drawing my own comics, as I'm sure most kids who like comics would try and draw their own. So I was doing that at age 13 and 14 and just kept doing it. And of course, wasn't great artwork or anything at that point. And then it came time to, at the end of grade 12, you've got to choose, like, well, what university course are you going to apply to? And Queensland College of Art, which was in Brisbane, happened to offer a Bachelor of Arts majoring in animation. And that was the closest university course that I could find to drawing comics. Like, that would teach me how to do something close to comics. Yeah. And so I applied.
Sorry to interrupt. Back at that period, like now that you mentioned that, just for younger viewers that aren't aware, because you've got online courses, you've got a lot of universities and that have thrown the doors open really to encourage this sort of thing. But back in I guess, early to mid 90s and stuff like that, these sorts of courses were rare, man, weren't they? You know what I mean?
Rare.
Like, it was hard to come by.
It was at that time, it was the only Bachelor of Arts program in the Southern Hemisphere that had an animation major.
Yeah, right.
And the only other course in Australia that dealt with animation was I think it was at the Melbourne Institute of Technology. But that was an associate degree in animation. So I was just lucky that the art college in my hometown happened to have that course. And so I applied for it, got in, and started learning how to animate. And but still, all the way through that course, I was like, I don't want to work in animation. I just want to do comics. And so, like, all of my assignments, I would try and do superhero stuff, and my final year film, which, you had to do to graduate, I did a superhero parody film called Fabulous Man. And he was like a Superman, but he was essentially the same as Steamroller Man, like a bumbling type dummy, very influenced by the Tick. The Tick's a big influence on Steamroller Man too, just that style of humor. Because that was also one of those comics that came out. I think that came out in like '88, so my early years collecting. And also, like, as I mentioned before, the Justice League, the Giffen de Matisse Justice League, which was also humorous superheroes. So I've always liked humorous superheroes. Anyway, eventually got into animation. Didn't do comics, but I always was saying in the back of my, I'd always tell myself, like, I want to do a comic one day. And, since I moved over here, I've gone to San Diego Comic Con every year. Because, you just drive 3 hours down the coast and you get to San Diego. So, that every time I'd go, I'd see the small press guys, it's just guys like you and I doing their own thing, making their own comics. And I always found that, like, super inspiring, and would always leave saying, like, I'm going to do it. This is the year I'm going to do it. But I just never got around to it because I would always be you'd have the day job and be like, oh, I'm too exhausted. Like the creative juice was sort of depleted at the end of the day. And anyway, many, many years later, I think I was about 45, and I just sort of realized if I want to do a comic, I've just got to do it. Like I just got to start doing it. Like, and I'd had a couple of false starts of, like, I had these ideas, and I remember I wrote like a full script out for the first issue of a comic idea that I had. And then I think I drew half of the first page, and then never got back to that. That wasn't Steamroller Man. That was something else. And so by this time I had 2 kids. I had my 2 kids, and being that both their parents were comic collectors and science fiction fans, they were, they had no hope but to wind up as fellow geeks like their parents. So we would have conversations around the dinner table about geeky topics like what's a good superhero name? Like the kids would make up these superhero names. And so, my older son would say one and I'd say one. And then my youngest son said, what about Steamroller Man? And I was like, yeah, Steamroller Man. I love it. Because the image of this guy with a huge roller as his head came into my imagination as soon as he said that. And I was like, yes, I love it. And I drew like, yeah, he'd look like this, see? And I held it up to my son, and my son was like, not like that. He didn't like it. He was like, I meant with steamrollers for hands, not his head. And so I said, all right, well, this will be my version of Steamroller Man then. And so then I took the kids to there was like a summer holiday workshop at the local public library of like make your own mini comic.
Yeah, cool.
And so, something for the kids to do. So I took them to that, and I thought, well, I've always wanted to make a comic, so I'm going to do the workshop too, because it was open. It wasn't just for kids. It was open to just the general public. And so in the workshop, they hand out, they're like, here's pens and pencils and paper. Here's how to do it. Okay, now go. Start making your own comic, after an hour of instruction where the guy was telling everyone, like, here's how comics work, basically. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? Oh, I know. I'll draw a comic with that Steamroller Man guy. And so I started drawing the first Steamroller Man story, which is on my website, steamrollerman.com. And I think I only got like the first 2 pages done. And I started off with, the cliched situation of the old lady with the cat stuck in the tree. And so, I was basically just making it up as I went along, and I just kept doing that. And I just drew it on pieces of, like photocopy paper. Like I was drawing it actual size. So the pages were quick I could finish a page really quickly because it was only like, that big. So I just kept drawing the comic every night after the kids went to sleep. And just as sort of a relaxing kind of de-stress thing from the day's, job stress or whatever.
Yep. Certainly.
And so I was just making the story up as I went along, and I got to about 12 pages of story, and then I was like, well, at that point I was sort of thinking, oh, I can photocopy this and make a little mini comic, and then I can just sell that at a comic convention, because that's always been one of my dreams, is to be the guy on the other side of the table at a comic convention, which I still haven't done.
Yeah.
But I'll get there.
Mate, I'm telling you, from what you're telling me, you're ticking those boxes the whole way along, man. So you've got intent, like you're gonna get there.
Yeah. So I had these 12 pages, but I didn't know what to do with them. And we went to San Diego, and at that time, this was around the time of the New 52.
Yeah, right.
From DC, and my sons were both now into comics.
Yeah.
And I'm still into comics, as you know. And so my son was really into the Teen Titans comic at that time, which was being drawn by an artist called John Boy Myers.
Mm-hmm.
And John Boy Myers was at Comic-Con in Artists Alley. And so my son was like, oh, can we go see John Boy Myers? And we were like, yeah, sure, no worries. So we went to John Boy Myers' table, and my son wanted to buy a print from him. And his artwork's amazing. And he has, his prints are fantastic. And so my son's looking through prints, and my son takes a long time to make decisions. And so he was looking, and so just to pass the time, my wife and I start just chatting to John Boy Myers, and I said to him, hey, can I just get your advice as a comic professional? I've got 12 pages of this comic that I've drawn, and I'm just wondering, should I print it, or should I put it on the web? But I don't know anything about putting a website together or anything like that. So what should I do to sort of get it out there? And he said, why don't you just put it on Facebook? Just set up a Facebook page for your comic.
Yeah.
And then just upload, you scan in the pages and upload the images. And I was like, oh, really? You can do that? How do you do it? And he said, you can go into the settings for your personal Facebook account, and then you set up a page. And I was like, okay, because I'm not a tech person at all. I don't know how to do websites or anything like that. And he actually said, once you get it set up, just send me a message on Facebook, and then I'll friend you. And then once you get it set up, I'll shout it out to all my followers, and maybe you'll get some followers from it. And I was like, oh, really? You do that? And he was like, yeah, sure. I'm all about trying to help, fellow creators get their stuff out there. And I was like, man, that's so awesome. That's so nice of you. Thank you so much. Yeah. And so I did that, and he was true to his word. Yeah. He did shout, sort of spread the word. And so that's how I started with Steamroller Man online. And then I just kept doing it. And eventually, I did kind of get a website, sort of figure out, okay, how do I do a website and all that sort of stuff. And so, I've been doing, I put it on the web in 2018, and it's just been going ever since. So I've got that initial 12-page story up, and then I've got two issues which are more like actual comic book format. And then I'm sort of in the middle of the third issue. So it's just it's basically a superhero parody. It's one person said it's like 70s Marvel comics and 80s independent comics had a baby. So
That's a cool
yeah.
comparison. You got to be happy with that.
I thought that was really cool, actually.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, I'm going to use that. That's great. So yeah, it's sort of a funny, I hopefully funny superhero parody comic just about Steamroller Man and having adventures. Yeah, so it's just something I'm doing primarily for myself to amuse myself, and initially it was to amuse my kids, because I would show them, what do you think of this? Do you think this is funny? And they'd be like, oh yeah, that's awesome. So that's when I would know, like, okay, that works. I'll make that the joke or whatever. So, and I try to do like a joke on each page, or at least something that makes, if it doesn't make you laugh, it'll at least make you smile. So yeah, that's the Steamroller Man story.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, man. From listening to that, because I have had a look at some of the Steamroller Man stuff, just to get an idea.
Thanks.
Because I hadn't met you before today,
right?
And I like your Facebook page in particular. This is the one that I've been looking at. Not only do you put finished pages up and clean pages for people to read, but what I think is super valuable to people, and that's why I like doing this show, and that's one of the things that, like with Shane and myself, with getting creators out there, is to see their techniques and how they do things and how you're comfortable working with things. And obviously from an animator's perspective is what you're bringing as well into Steamroller Man, that's available to look on Facebook. I love the fact that you show, even rough page layouts, and then you'll show the improved version of them all the way, because I'm pretty sure as your cycle from collecting seems to have been nudged by quite a bit of synchronicities, I guess, to a certain extent, mate, to nudge you along the path to where you're at now, to the gentleman helping you. And I would say that what you're doing with showing the makings of on your Facebook page is serving to help others that were in the same position that you were when you were younger. You're not quite sure, you're a little bit tentative about what you've got to do, where you're going, and you've sort of come full circle to an extent with all of that, man, which is something that I personally think that's a beautiful thing, man, because it's just something I often talk about and speak about is the karmic effect of how people shouldn't gatehouse keep, you know what I mean? Like you should pass on knowledge and keep the flow going and things. So I commend you for that. I also think it's beautiful. My pleasure. I also think it's beautiful because something that resonated with me and what you were just talking about is I'm 46 and I don't have children, but I always wanted to have children. And one of the reasons in your mind, is in the theaters of your mind, you always have these perfect ideologies of life. Sometimes it doesn't go that way, other times it does. But one of the things that I always considered that I would love to have, if it was at all, it won't be, but if it was possible at one point in some other parallel, was to be able to sit around with your kids and talk about them and fuel their imagination, and at the same time fueling your own imagination and creating that beautiful bond and the chemistry and between each other. So I think from what you've told me there, man, very envious, and I think that you're on a good path, man, with Steamroller Man. That's
That's
all right.
really nice of you to say. Yeah, thanks very much.
No, that's cool, man. And I'd say you're not far away from being on the other side of that table very soon, man, because
Well,
you're feeling motivated.
if
Well,
I can, if I can get my act together to get the Kickstarter campaign launched.
Oh man, everything I think, you know, I used to be someone that was always in a rush as well. This is just me. I mean, I don't know what life outside of here is for you, other than what you explained to me. I imagine it's quite hectic and busy, but you're calm, and you have your paths that you want to take. But I think the last couple of years of my life has taught me a lot of things, that some things happen at the time they're meant to. And
Right.
like you can push and push and push as much as you want, and it's amazing how driven and pushing you are, but suddenly it's like there's walls just popping up all in front of you, and you're just like and then suddenly it's almost like you just give over control to what's meant to be. And then
Right.
suddenly the walls just start dropping down, and you're like, holy hell, man, I'm fully in a flow here. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm
Yep.
going with the flow. And
I do know what you mean. Yep.
yeah, and I think everything happens at the time it's meant to, man. That's the lesson that I'm in the middle of. Like, so yeah, that was really nice to hear that side of the story, man, of your life there. It's really
Thanks.
cool. No, that's
Thanks.
cool.
Yeah,
Man.
I mean, because it's been the whole experience has been a big. It's just been one big learning curve for me. Like I'm still not at a point where I feel like I completely know what I'm doing in terms of writing a story. Like I was making the story up as I went, page by page, until I was about halfway through that second story. And then people, because I'd been putting the pages on the Facebook page by that time, and people started asking me, oh, your comic's looking really good. Are you going to print it? And I thought, yeah, I do want to print it. But then I realized, well, hang on, if I'm going to print it, then I've got to know like how many pages this story's going to be. And I don't even know what the story is because I was just making it up page by page.
Yeah.
And so it was only at that point when I was already halfway through the first story, well, after that 12-page one, I was already halfway through the second story. And that's when I sat down and was like, okay, what I know basically where I want the story to end, but what has to happen to get from where it is now to that point? And so then I started doing my, writing out my plot, and then, the art has been a learning curve as well, because like if you look at the early pages, there's still like the people are far more cartoony, and they're actually like at Simpsons proportions with, because we have like a standard sort of construction for a Simpsons character. They're the 4 heads high.
Yep.
And so I was kind of drawing the weird, not like proper human proportions. And so then it wasn't until people were saying to me, oh, you're drawing in Simpsons proportions. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, yeah, see, it's not like proper human proportions. Human proportions would be like the torso is like 3 heads tall, and then the legs are 4 heads. And I was like, yeah, I'm drawing in Simpsons proportions on purpose. Yeah, that's right. But then, I was like, oh, God damn it. Like, I got to fix this. I got to like figure out like what, because I hadn't done like any kind of like model sheet or anything for Steamroller Man. I hadn't actually worked out like what his standard kind of construction proportions were going to be. And so
Yeah.
it's only been like a step-by-step thing where I've gradually figured out like, oh, I should probably do this. Oh, yeah, it would be better if I did that. And it's just like that even to this day. Like I'm still, especially with the website stuff. I don't know what I'm doing with the website stuff. I'm just barely kind of getting things to work, and yeah, so I'm happy to share that knowledge with other people.
Yeah.
And if they get something out of it, that's fantastic. And if if all they get out of it is like, oh, it's interesting to see your process, then that's cool too. Because I think it's interesting to see the process of artists that I admire. I like all that sort of, really like those issues where of comics where they'll put like the behind the scenes page layouts or character design sketches in the back.
Yeah. Well, those
I
trade
like all that
paperbacks.
stuff too.
We're similar ages. I used to buy those trade paperbacks when they first came out, because they used to have like 10 or 12 pages in the back, and you could actually see the pencil pages in comparison to the ink.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you do learn things, because I was when I was a kid, I was penciling everyone's different style, I guess, but things develop. But I was penciling like I was inking, if you know what I mean. And as opposed to learning the little crosses and the little hatches and the little this, that you can save time to do the pencil, so you can move, so you can you flesh out the story, you get it solid, and then the inker comes in and puts lays the brings it to life, sort of thing, And I had no idea they were so valuable, those trade paperbacks. That's why I think people share their knowledge now are so valuable, man. Because like, even being in Townsville, this isn't like, it's a 200,000 people, city, but it's isolated. You know what I mean? Like the next bit, Brisbane's the closest capital city, and that's 1,500 kilometers away.
Right.
Cairns is the next closest one, and that's 400 kilometers up the road, And in between all of these places, there are smaller towns and communities. And I always think to myself, if I feel isolated here at certain points, my God, there must be some kids out there that love their comics and are sitting there drawing and stuff, you know what I mean? That are far more isolated communities than what I am.
Right.
And that is why I love hearing those sorts of stories, because hopefully these sorts of things can reach, those kids come across these things and go, oh, so they thought that too, or this is what they did, that's how they found out, and it's good, man. It's good, because I like the fact you've admitted too that you're still learning, because I'm in the same boat. I know nothing. I just draw, man. Like anyone says to me, can you show me here? Nah, man, I just draw. I really don't know how I do it. I just sit down. I've been drawing since I was a kid, and I just try stuff.
Yeah.
And some of it's wrong. Some of it's, right.
Right.
I have a joke with my mates that the reason why Bustle is set in a smoky, atmospheric, dystopian world is because all the smoke's there to cover up all the mistakes that, I've made along the way, mate.
It's very smart.
Yeah, or being a traditional, artist, I can't sort of go back and, gloss over the page and shit, and stuff. There you go. See, swear word, first one of the year. Boom, boom. All right, I'll put $1 in the jar later on. But you do learn, and you shouldn't stop learning, because another quote I read the other day, really weirdly, that's along the topic, to paraphrase it. It was a Miyamoto Musashi quote, and it was something to the effect of, when you first learn something, it's always hard. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I guess the trick is from that is just you got to start. You can't
Right.
expect it.
Exactly.
With full knowledge. So
Mm-hmm.
Encouragement all around. But did you find that all of your years working on The Simpsons and your varying animation technique, obviously you didn't realise had sort of influenced your artwork?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess to a certain extent, when you're doing Steamroller Man, and I mean, because when you think about, you said it before, come home from the day job, I like to relax, So your day job is animating, which essentially is drawing and, making images. And
Yep.
then you come home, you kick the shoes back, kick the shoes off, you chuck your feet up on the box of Uncanny X-Men, so you can relax while you're watching the LA Rams or the Lakers or whatever tickles your fancy over there.
Yep.
And then you start drawing. So, is it difficult to transition from the animator within you to coming into the Steamroller Man within you, if you know what?
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. And I think that my work experience, or my, career experience working in animation, definitely informs things like my sense of composition would not be anywhere near what it is without my experience from animation and doing storyboards and layout, and because that's where I really learned how to compose images for maximum impact, and how to direct the eye, how to direct the viewer's eye with your composition and stuff like that. So I definitely use those skills for the comic. But when I first started the comic, it was, I mean, I get what you're saying, that, I've been drawing all day, and yet to relax, I'm still drawing. So that's what I did think for years and years, was I've been drawing all day. I don't want to draw. I just want to watch TV, to relax.
Yeah.
But it was that sort of sense of, hey, you're not getting any younger, so just do it. And you can't, you always wanted to do this. So it's now or never kind of thing. And so then it became, once it became a habit, which was after I'd been doing it every day for about a month at the same time, it became a habit, and then it felt weird not to do it. And so once it became a habit, it was more about, I was getting satisfaction from drawing my own thing, because I had spent not only the whole day, the whole week, but my whole career drawing somebody else's characters. That's what, that's what a job in animation is, really, is you're not drawing your own characters usually. You're drawing somebody else's characters, and that's what you're being paid for, is to do that to the best of your ability. So the comic became, well, I'm doing this for me. I get to draw what I want now, and I can do whatever I want with this comic. And so that's where I really started to kind of find the love for doing my own comic. Was because it was all mine, and I could take the story wherever I wanted, and I could put whatever, jokes I wanted into it, and I could draw whatever I felt like drawing. So I think it's both it's a discipline that works both in tandem with the animation stuff, but also in opposition to the animation stuff in another way.
Yes.
And so it's also because I've been on The Simpsons for 25 years, as I said. That's a long time to be drawing one set of characters. Oh, we're
Absolutely.
frozen. And so, I'm frozen on the screen. I'm not sure if you can still hear me or not.
I can hear you, mate. So that's
okay. I'll just keep talking then.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a long time to be drawing one set of characters. So, in my opinion, I feel like I'm pretty good at drawing those characters, but I had literally not drawn anything else for years besides the drawing that I was doing on The Simpsons. And so it's also good to sort of stretch those artistic muscles to draw to something else. And so that's another thing that I get great satisfaction from doing Steamroller Man is, I'm having to really like force myself to increase my skills at drawing like anatomy and backgrounds and just all sorts of stuff, really.
Absolutely. Did you so you've sort of really realistically you have created two separate worlds, your work, and then you've come home and you've created a routine because and a space for you to take on Steamroller Man, which the more you sort of read about a lot of people that do that sort of stuff and routines and little things that they change, you know what I mean? And what is it that it takes 20 I think that's why they do 28-day rehabs and stuff like that for particular times and detoxes, because it's a 28-day thing for something to become a habit, you know what I mean? So on the 20th day, your body has sort of like clicked into a notion of, okay, I'm in a new routine now. And then it just comes down to all of the the self-esteem sort of side of things, and with what you've done, it seems that bang, you have clicked into that like that new routine and essentially a meditation, because from what you're talking about is you sound to me like you've come home, you're relaxing with this now, you're comfortable with it, you're doing Steamroller Man, you're feeling good about yourself because you're feeling progress, in the thing you want to do. Because when you mention, because that's probably the second time now in our conversation that you've mentioned you've been 25 years on The Simpsons. Now, I would imagine that spending 25 years like working on The Simpsons would be an honor and a mind explosion in itself, like, wow, like even to this day, you probably still get like, wow, I work on The Simpsons. And I can definitely tell you that close friends in the community who will watch this when it's aired will be sitting down watching it and listening to it, thinking, like, my God, Matt Schofield is like the luckiest man in the world because that's all, like we've ever wanted to do. But I would assume and I certainly, I'm trying to articulate this question. Like everything, I would assume sometimes you do need a break and just a little, I need to decompress from, no matter how lucky or grateful I am for the opportunity and what I'm doing, I just need a little bit of me time, just to step out of that zone there. And this is what Steamroller Man has given to you from the sounds of things.
Yeah. Well, I think that, any job, no matter how much fun you're having at it when you first start, it becomes a job.
Yeah.
At some
Yeah.
at some point, it becomes a job. It's not.
Yeah.
You go past that. When I first started on The Simpsons, I was like, "Oh my god, I'm working on The Simpsons," because I was a huge fan. The Simpsons started
Yeah.
on TV in Australia when I was in my first year of art college studying animation.
Gotcha.
So to eventually wind up working on, and we loved, like, everyone in my first year animation class. I remember every Monday we would come in and discuss the Simpsons episode that had been on the night before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody was like, "Did you see that new show, The Simpsons? Oh my God, it's so funny. It's hilarious." And then, so to then a few years later be working on the show, like, I could never have imagined back then I would wind up working on the show, let alone being lucky enough to have stayed on the show
Mm.
and worked in various different roles on the show, because I started off as a character layout artist, which is essentially the animators on the show.
Yeah.
And then I became an assistant director, and then eventually got to direct some episodes, and now I'm the
Yeah.
supervising storyboard director on the show.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been doing that. This is the 10th year that I've been doing that job. And so, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's an awesome job to have, like,
Yeah.
to work in animation and to be working on The Simpsons, which is a phenomenon
I
in
was just going to say
just,
phenomenon would be the best
yeah,
word. It's everyone anywhere in the world knows The
right.
Simpsons. Yeah.
And in the history of animation, because animation is a relatively young art form. It's a
Mm.
20th century art form, so it's not
Mm.
even, it doesn't even have that long of a history. So to be part of this history making show, which is like, the longest running animated
Mm.
sitcom, and the longest running this and the longest running that, and yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing to just be part of it. And so, yeah, I'm incredibly grateful, and I feel really, really lucky, to have the job that I have, especially coming from Brisbane. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never would have thought, like, I was just some kid from Brisbane. Like, I
Yeah.
never would have thought I'd wind up on The Simpsons ever.
Some
So
kid from Brisbane riding around on push bikes, like going to
exactly,
book
riding to
exchanges
the
and,
book exchange on
like
Saturday
he
morning.
suddenly
Yeah,
finds himself in a 25-year career on The Simpsons,
yeah,
mate. You know what I
exactly.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
man, I got take me back to what was your feeling when you like what was the process of getting to The Simpsons? Like, did you just see a resume in the, like the LA Times or something that just said, "Oh, animator wanted," and you thought, "I'll have a crack at it," or had you? Because you said previously that you'd worked on a few animated movies, most notably for
Hmm.
me, the one that I know of is The Iron Giant.
Yeah.
Did you find your way in that regard? Like, how? What was the steps to
Well,
Simpsons?
yeah. When I first arrived in LA, I didn't really know anybody, and so I made friends with guys at work or whatever, and one of my friends who I worked with on Cats Don't Dance,
Yep.
he had moved out to LA with about 6 guys he went to college with. They
Yep.
all moved out at the same time to try and find work in the LA film and animation industry. And
Yep.
so he sort of had his own friendship group kind of ready made. And so he was one of the first guys I got to know in LA. and he sort of said, "Oh, hey, do you want to, like, my friends and I are going to see this movie on Friday night. Do you want to come with us?" And so I was like, "Yeah, I don't have anything else to do. I don't know anybody, so sure." And so I sort of became part of that friendship group. And one of the guys who was in one of the other guys who was in that group worked on The Simpsons. And so I kind of became friends with that whole group. And then a couple of years later, when I was working on The Iron Giant, it was when The Iron Giant, no, what was it? When Quest for Camelot came out, and it was a bomb, like, you know, because we were working on Quest for Camelot, and as we were working on that, we knew, like, everybody who was working on it knew, like, this film's going to be terrible. Like,
why did you have that feeling? Like, this is just, do you know, obviously you knew when you were working, your intuition was on a bit, you know.
Well,
like,
I think some of it is just professional cynicism, you know, like, people just are like, this is terrible. I'm sick of working on this. This movie's gonna bomb. I've heard from friends who worked on Lion King, they thought Lion King was going to be a failure. And of course, it was a huge success. So on the one hand, you never know. You never know whether it's going to click and connect with the public or not. But with Quest for Camelot, I don't know, there was just something about the story, you know, because they put together like a rough cut of the movie with just storyboard panels edited together. So you can watch every new employee who starts on the movie. Your first day, they're like, okay, we're going to sit you in this room, and we're going to show you the film at the current stage that it's at. And usually at that stage, it's like storyboard panels, and they'll have cut in rough animation of some of the scenes that they've already approved. But mostly it's still in that real prototype form. But even when you're watching it in that form, you can see, like, this story is not good. And so that came out, and that was a bomb. And then we were working on Iron Giant, and it was the opposite. Like, we all knew this is really good. This movie's going to be really good. But it was already talk of, like, towards the end of Iron Giant, there was already talk of Warner Brothers was not going to promote the film. And, you know, they were shifting around the release date. And so it was basically like, I could see the writing on the wall. And then when Iron Giant came out and it failed at the box office because Warner Brothers didn't promote it, so that they didn't really know what they had. And it failed at the box office. And so at that point, I had an offer to stay on at Warner Brothers to work on the next movie, which was Osmosis Jones. But I could see the writing on the wall, because I was like, if this company can't make Iron Giant a hit, because it's such a good film, and if they can't make that a success, like, it's almost like this was a no-brainer. All you had to do was advertise it, and this would have been a huge success, and they couldn't even do that. So at that point, I was like, maybe it's time to get out of feature animation and try and do TV. But TV seemed like such a different way of doing animation to me, because all I'd done up to that point was feature animation, and it is a very different way of doing it. So I didn't even know at that stage, like, what jobs do you even have in TV animation? Because I knew that all the actual animation on TV shows was done in Korea.
Yeah, right.
They only did the storyboard. They only did up to the storyboards in the United States, and then they sent the rest of the work overseas.
Yeah, right.
And not always Korea. I mean, some of the work was being done by studios in Sydney, and Melbourne. But I had this friend, as I said, who was working on The Simpsons, and so I asked him, like, I'm thinking of getting into, like, trying to get into TV animation. Like, what jobs are there that I could do with my feature animation experience? And he said, well, we kind of do animation on The Simpsons. It's character layout, but we really pose it out. Like, we do a lot of drawings and a lot of poses. So it's almost like you're doing character animation. Would you want to do that? And I said, yeah, that sounds cool. I'd love to do that. How do I get that job? And he said, oh, there's a test. There's a layout test. I can get you a copy. So he got me a copy of the test, and I did the test, and I showed it to him, and he was like, okay, let me show you a few things. Here's how we draw this, So the test that they gave us was, it was 2 scenes. One was Homer gets into bed, and, so you have to show him, like, lifting up the blanket, getting in bed, and then putting the blanket down over him. And then the other scene was I think it was in the Simpsons living room, and Bart gets up on the couch and Homer says woohoo or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but, so they designed the test to see whether you could draw the characters, but also turn them in space and draw them in poses that looked like they were doing, anatomically correct movements to do what the actions that you were being asked to have them do. So yeah, I did the test, and with my friend's guidance, like, I would show him the test, and he would say, okay, I want you to go back and take another crack at this and work on this and work on that. And, it was like he was marking an exam sort of thing.
Yeah,
and he'd say, we don't draw Homer's eyes like this. Here, let me show you. And so he would do, like, a little Post-it note and say, here's how I construct Homer's head. And he would so he basically taught me how to draw the characters. So after I think I did the test like 3 or 4 times over, and I showed it to him each time, and he finally said, okay, this is good enough to submit now. So I turned it in, and I got offered a job doing character layout. And it was actually like $250 a week less than what I was getting paid to do feature animation. But I was like, well, I guess I've just got to start at the bottom again. And, you got to do what you got to do. And plus, it was The Simpsons, and I was a huge fan of The Simpsons. So I was like, I don't really care. Like, as long as I can pay my bills, I get to work on The Simpsons, and that's cool. So I started as a character layout artist, and my first show that I worked on, I had to draw. The episode was Take My Wife's Sleaze, and I think that was in season 11. And it was about a motorcycle gang that comes to Springfield, and Homer forms his own motorcycle gang. Oh, that's what it was. Homer forms his own motorcycle gang, and he calls them the Hell's Satans. but then there's already a real motorcycle gang called the Hell's Satans. So they roll into town to have like a rumble with Homer for the rights to the name of the Hell's Satans. And so I had to draw, there's this climactic fight between Homer and the leader of the motorcycle gang, where they actually pick up their motorcycles and start like clanging them against each other like a sword fight. And so I was just like, I've got to draw what now?
Yeah, that.
Animate motorcycles being turned like this.
Wow.
So that was a huge learning curve. And it was like really felt like, oh, I'm dropped in the deep end now. I better figure out how to draw motorcycles. And because, you know, in feature animation, you only draw one character, like you're assigned to one character for the length of the film.
Gotcha.
On The Simpsons, you're assigned a section of the show. It's like, okay, you're going to get scenes 32 through 42. And then whatever is in those scenes, you are responsible for drawing all of it, whether it's a crowd rioting, whether it's like a guy riding a horse, whether it's Homer fighting another dude with motorcycles, you know? So you just have to, like, that's being on The Simpsons really expanded my drawing skills, because you are forced to draw whatever's in the script. So many different things from day to day, and it's not only the characters, but you would also have to draw like a rough background. So I had to learn perspective and how to compose an image, and also if there were effects in those days, we didn't have like dedicated effects artists, which we do now. Since the Simpsons movie, we've had like 3 effects artists on this TV show, but before that we had to draw our own, you know. So if there was fire or water or anything in the scene, we had to draw that too. So yeah, it really expanded my drawing skills being on The Simpsons. So
wow, man. So
yeah,
like, I just want to paint an emotional picture here. So you're rocking in there, you're feeling good. Yeah, Simpsons, rock on. And they go like, Matt, here's your script. And you're like, don't look at it. You go and sit down at your drawer and desk or whatever it is. And you're like, man, you're looking around, soaking in the atmosphere. And you're like, I've made it. I'm in The Simpsons. I love The Simpsons, man. Get my chi together, and I'm calm and ready to rock and roll. Let's have a look at the script. Yep. Homer is fencing with a motorbike against a bike. Like, like how? What was that moment like? Like I thought I'd be drawing a water bubbler or something like that. But you know,
it was
screw me in, man.
It was definitely a Scooby-Doo like ruh-roh kind of moment. Like,
they must have had some breath in you though, mate.
It was intimidating is the word for it. And I just was like, okay, so how am I going to do this? And I kind of just figured out that it's just about breaking down in the same way that I would break down a character into the shapes of construction forms, you know, like balls and cylinders type thing. It was the same thing with the motorcycle. Like I was like, okay, well, the wheels are going to be these circular prisms, and then the engine is like sort of like a cylinder, and then this is this shape. And so it was just a matter of like breaking it down into 3-dimensional sort of blocky solid shapes that then you could animate turning those much more easily. And then once you get that rough pass done, then you go back in and add your details. And And so, you know, I still
Yeah.
sort of approach drawing that way now, is like, you know, you get the line of action. I mean, it's the way you're supposed to draw. It's the way that all the books tell you to draw. But I had never drawn backgrounds or props or vehicles, or I hadn't drawn anything but characters. And I find that like I see online in a lot of, like, because I'm in a lot of Facebook comic making groups.
Yes.
And I see a lot of people in those groups saying like, "Oh, I hate drawing backgrounds. How do I draw backgrounds? Does anyone have advice on how to draw backgrounds?" And, you know, a few times I've sort of chimed in and said, "Look, there's no magic trick to it. You just have to start practicing drawing backgrounds, and you will eventually get good at drawing backgrounds. And then you will get to a point where you actually enjoy drawing the backgrounds." Because that was what happened to me. I hated drawing backgrounds. I never wanted to draw backgrounds when I was doing my own comics, my little, you know, this was way back when I was a teenager. My comics, I don't think I ever drew a background, ever. It was always just the characters in the panel. And so it wasn't until The Simpsons where I was like, "No, you will draw a background because that's part of your job." And so then I was like, and so I found, I asked my workmates, like, "How do you do perspective?" And then one of them said, "Here, look in this book." And the book was actually called Perspective for Comic Book Artists, by an artist called David Chelsea. And that book is actually written as a graphic novel. It's like Understanding Comics. It's that sort of format where it's like non-fiction, informative type stuff, but it's in comic format. And that actually had, so I looked through that and I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it. Okay, that's how you do perspective." I mean, I still remembered a little bit of doing perspective because we had, like, in grade 8, we did like, I can't even remember what it was. Basically like orthographic type drawing class. I think we just called it graphics in school when I was in high school.
Yeah, I used to have graphics. It was just known as graphics, and that was where you'd go in with the cube paper and have to do all the symmetrical shapes and all that sort of stuff.
So I think we learned perspective, just like basic, like, this is 1-point perspective, this is 2-point perspective, and this is 3-point perspective. Now draw a cube in each one of those, you know, and that was it. So I sort of knew the principles, but I didn't know how to apply it to, well, how do you place a figure in a background and make it look like their height is proportional to the door on the other side of the background? Like, how do you work that out and make it all look correct? So, it was just again, it was just a learning curve, reading books and getting tips from my workmates who had been doing it longer than I had. And now I'm sort of passing those tips on to younger work colleagues now that I'm in a supervisory position at work. So
teaching,
come
helping,
full circle. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is. I liked your explanation there too, because you covered, like, I mean, I know nothing about animation other than the little principles and stuff that I've picked up along the way and stuff, but you've given me a real clear cut description of how things are, you know. Like, I also love the fact that despite having different levels of drawing, like, you know, across the 3 mediums, whether it's comics to the feature film, just drawing like the figure, to then coming to The Simpsons and, like, okay, I've got to draw backgrounds and figures and stuff like that. There really is a very closely shared principle across all of it, isn't there? You know what I mean? Like, and it's interesting that you were talking about perspective and things, because I remember when I was learning to draw as a young kid, I was very much, and from my perspective, it came across as, I just want to draw foreground figures. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to draw those dudes in the front. You know what I mean?
The cool stuff.
That. Yeah, man. Yeah, I don't want to draw some dude having a coffee in the window, like 6 shops down and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Exactly. And then the weird part is as I started drawing more, you sort of start picking up storytelling tropes, don't you? And you start realizing, like, that person sitting in that background having that coffee is telling 1,000 words that don't even need to be spoken, like,
right.
You learn that is essential. Like, people may not see it, but you need to have it there,
Yeah.
I think that's an awesome, like what you've shared there, like in that particular with the animation and stuff, because I'm sort of blown out. I keep thinking about the Iron Giant, because I never saw it when it first came out, right?
Neither did anybody else.
Yes, from what you were telling me, yes. So I'm thankfully I'm not in a small club. Maybe, I don't know, but. But I have, over the years, seen it, and it is a lovely film. And it's one of those films that it's picked up a cult status, because wherever you go and there's DVDs are sold or Blu-rays are sold, or like you're on your your Primes or your Disney, all that sort of like streaming services and things.
Yep.
You always come across it regularly. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, there's the Iron Giant. There's the Iron Giant. Like that sort of thing. Like, man, I would suggest that, or think that, while it may not have been successful at that time, I think it's picked up a really, really positive cult following over the years, man. And I've caught it multiple times, and so have mates of mine. We've spoken about the Iron Giant before a heap of times, and it's really, really, really weird that this is what I love about Chinwags, Matt. I generally come in like I come in with sometimes knowledge of people and sometimes no knowledge of people. So I like to come in and, I guess, have no expectations on what conversations and stories are going to be about, and, meeting people and stuff, because I sort of have this idea now that if you judge someone, or, like you're not sure on someone, or you show it, like a bit of hesitance towards someone, you're keeping yourself from that person, and you're keeping yourself from, like that person from you. And you got to share, you got to talk. It's the pleasure of meeting, communicating. And I have to say that, mate, what you've talked to me today about is has really, like, very, very happily surprised me, man, in terms of your career and what you've done. And, like, I know, like, you live it and it's your life and things like that. But, to think in my mind while I've been listening to you that, you're on The Simpsons, you've done the Iron Giant, like that sort of thing. And to think that I've partaken in watching, episodes and been along the journey with these things, and you've been, like a part of its creation along the way, man. I reckon that's really, really cool, man. And I think that's pretty awesome. Plus the principles of drawing that, we've been talking about today and stuff. Because sometimes I think too, like like what you did, I think really well there, man, is you broke it down across three spectrums. You know what I mean? Like the drawing, the comic books, to the film, to the animation side. And I think sometimes when people are learning stuff, they can get a little bit overwhelmed by a lot of details. You know what I mean? Like, but you just did it so really nice, succinctly, just boom, boom, boom. This is the difference between the three mediums. You know, like, and this is what it is. And for someone like me, who knows a little bit about everything, but I guess I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. And I wouldn't call myself the sharpest. It takes me a few chops at the block, if you know what I'm saying. Sometimes that just made complete and utter sense and absolute clarity with what you spoke about there.
Well, thanks, Lee. I started laughing when you said I put it succincly, because I have a reputation amongst my friends of being the most long-winded, verbose person they know. I don't think any of them would say I'm succinct in any way. So thank you, sir. I will take that.
That's okay, mate. That's okay, because it was. I thought it was very well put, mate. So you know, you can tell your friends that I think you're succinct, and maybe that goes to show you and I probably resonate more with each other than what we realise, because I don't think too many of my mates would call me that either. You know, like some of my mates, you know, when I start, man, like some of them go, oh, you know, like I've got to be somewhere in 2 hours, mate. You know, like you're just answering the question.
Yeah, that sounds.
I just asked you if you wanted a coffee. You know, not your life
sounds
story.
About the same. Sounds about the same as my experience. Yeah.
That's great. It's beautiful. So what comics you been buying of late that's caught your eye, man?
Oh, let's see. I have been buying. I'm really enjoying Chip Zdarsky's run on Batman. I was reading Tom King's run, and then I sort of dropped Batman because I was like, oh, that was pretty long, and I didn't really like the way Tom King's run ended.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I think I'm just going to take a break from Batman. But then Jorge Jimenez was the artist on, you know, when Chip Zdarsky came on, Jorge Jimenez came on, and I love Jimenez's artwork, and so I was really just interested in the artwork. But then when I read the first issue and then the first storyline, I was like, oh man, this is really good stuff. Like, because I'd never read any of Chip Zdarsky's work before this. So I was really impressed, and I continue to be impressed. So I'm really loving that. And also, I'm reading a lot of DC stuff, not a lot of Marvel stuff. I'm reading The Gargoyle of Gotham by Raphael Grandpa, which is another Batman one, which is amazing. Like, every issue of that, I mean, there's only been 2 issues so far, so, you know, every issue, it's 2 issues, but the way that Raphael Grandpa constructs a page, like when you really study his artwork, he leads the reader's eye down the page so perfectly, just because of where he's spotting the blacks and putting the areas of contrast. Like, it's amazing to just look at how well his pages flow, which is, you know, that's a bonus on top of just his style of drawing is so nice to look at as well. Like, he draws a really cool looking Bruce Wayne. Looks a little bit like Robert Pattinson did in the movie The Batman. But yeah, really enjoying that. World's Finest by Mark Waid and Dan Mora. Dan Mora is another artist who I'm like I don't know how he does it. Like, he's drawing two comics a month, and his art looks so good.
Yeah.
And
I
Mark
don't know how
Waid,
they do that either, man. Like
no,
just that, it. I mean, mind you, I'm a bit more. I'm a bit more of like I like painting, so I sort of treat
oh,
my
nice.
pages as painting, and I take my time and and I think about things, and I've tried Russians, like, and I sound like Jim from the Book Exchange, mate, in the end, and it doesn't work with me. So I just, like, I don't know anyone that
Right.
like look at deadlines and then not only take one deadline, but like, yeah, look, I'll do two. Is like,
I
man,
know. It's
superpowers.
amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, Mark Waid, I think Mark Waid's one of my favorite comic book writers, just because he knows how to write a quote unquote good old fashioned superhero story.
yeah, yeah,
He's got such a breadth of knowledge of Silver Age superhero kind of detail and trivia and continuity, that he can just put all that stuff into a story, but also give it like a modern feel to it.
yeah.
And so I'm really enjoying World's Finest. I think that's great. And from Marvel, I've been reading Amazing Spider-Man, but not super enjoying it. Like I'm enjoying it enough to keep buying it, but I'm just like, can we not do more of these rec rap stories? It just seems a little directionless in terms of, like, oh, now we're doing this, and we're just going to do this for 2 issues, and now we're doing something completely different for, like, there's no sort of through line, and then it jumps back. I don't know. It's just, it's a bit weird.
I
Incredible
think
Hulk has been
they
really
might have
great.
given themselves a way out to do that with all that multiverse stuff too, because it seems like everyone's got a multiverse now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's like you have to doctor it, man. Like, so, like over in the UK, they've got, like, you can. I was watching a Tolkien documentary once, and there was this dude that came on, and he was like talking. He was young, man. Like, he'd probably be, I guess, about 40 now. At the time, like, he looked like like really young guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, this dude must have read a lot of Tolkien books. And then underneath it, professor of Tolkienism at, like, some university in England. I was like, okay, like, he knows his stuff. So
Right.
pretty soon, we'll be like professor of multi-universalism across Marvel and DC. Like, it's
I
like,
wouldn't be
man,
surprised.
job there, your name badge, Lee Jordan, professor
Yeah.
of multi. What the hell is that?
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure that somebody will create a college level course to teach that stuff at some point, just to study it, like study the different fictional multiverses or whatever.
Oh, man. Yeah, could you imagine? This is class 916, and over there is class 818, like varying things, like, and the naughty boys go to the Zack Schneider room, like, or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Which, I got to be honest with you, I don't know if you're the same, but I didn't mind the extended version of the Justice League. I'm just saying, like, I just thought that was okay.
It was definitely a better film, but I think it didn't need to be as long as it was.
You're right there.
Like, I liked all the extra stuff that he put in with Darkseid and the New Gods and Apocalypse, and the story definitely made more sense. But at the same time, I sort of came away thinking, if you need 3.5 hours to tell your story, then you're doing something wrong. Like, you got to do something to condense your story.
Or what about the
shouldn't need
15
3.5
minutes of
hours.
Superman screaming and listening and watching it echo around the globe
Yes.
and affecting everyone?
Or the Norwegian singers singing that whole song, that whole slow song when Aquaman came out of the water.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't need to see this whole song.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's like, I suppose, I mean, if you've got the opportunity to be self-indulgent to a certain extent, I suppose,
that's
like
the
one
thing.
more.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, one rip, I just remember sitting there and thinking, like, you'd have, "Oh!" like, and it'd go for a minute. And that was cool. It was cool. Superman's obviously superhuman powered. He's got big lungs, so it's going to have to be a big scream. And then you'd feel the breath tapering off, you'd feel it dull down, and you'd think, okay, on to the next scene. And then it was like,
oh! Yeah, then he starts again.
Yeah. Oh, man, how long have we got here? Like, I'm gonna like stop breathing in a minute and just pass out. Like,
I do think that that movie would not have worked as well at that length in a theater.
Oh.
But being able to watch it at home,
Yeah.
where you can take a break,
Yep.
especially because in the director's cut, in the Snyder cut, they broke it up into chapters, and so that was like a convenient point to be like, all right, pause, gonna go have a bathroom break, make myself a little piece of toast or whatever, get a drink, and then I'll come back and let's watch Act 2 or whatever. Like, that's the perfect way to like, resume screaming.
Oh my God, like 45.
But that was the perfect way to watch it. It's like, well, if I can watch it at home and I can take breaks, then this works. But I don't want to sit in a theater for almost 4 hours watching that.
Yeah.
So I think it was the right moment for that to be released, because it was a result of the pandemic and Warner Brothers being like, oh my God, well, what are we going to do? Oh, let's do the Snyder cut and we'll put it on streaming. Because, at that point, theaters were all closed. So it was sort of the perfect movie for that moment, I think.
I agree. I enjoyed it for what it was, man. I look back on that quite fondly, to be honest with you. I thought it was pretty cool. So, thumbs up to him. It incorporated all of those sort of cool elements of the heroes. But I don't read a lot of modern comic books. I am a bit of a Batman sticker, I've got to be honest with you. I do pick up a Batman comic here and there. I sort of tend to lean more towards trade paperbacks these days. Been reading a little bit of manga as it pops up here and there.
What sort of manga are you reading?
Pretty heavily into Berserk at the moment. I didn't think I'd enjoy it, to be honest. But sometimes you just try things and like just boom, like whoa, okay, this is some rhythm with that. And one of the young fellas that I work with, he reads a lot of manga, and I'd never heard of this thing called Chainsaw Man.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it.
And I was like, okay, what's it about? And he was like, it's got a chainsaw for a head, chainsaw for arms, and he chainsaws people up. And I'm like, yeah, right. Sounds deep, and thoughtful. And so he went and bought me the first volume of Chainsaw Man, and he said, here, like, just have a go. And I was like, all right, sure. And I got to be honest with you, I actually, man, there's more to it than what it would initially suggest. So I quite like that. And recently read an Image comic called Geiger, which
Oh yes.
which I think was worth the read, you know. So I'd never heard of that before. So I try and keep up with modern comic books, I guess. Do a lot more reading of Australian comics these days. Try and support the local industry as much as I can and things. And you know, that of my friends and people in the community. So I do what I can for that sort of stuff. But you know, comics are a beautiful medium, man. So
the Australian comic community / industry seems to have really expanded since since I was in Australia, you know, because I'm completely out of touch with what's being published in Australia now. But you know, I remember in the 90s there was like Issue 1 and Zero Assassin and Platinum Grit. And then, you know, like Cyclone, we were talking earlier before we started recording about your Glenn Lumsden interview, but like I loved Cyclone as a kid. Like when I discovered that there was like Australian comics, that was like, you know, kind of a game changer, because I wanted to draw comics and these were Australian guys actually doing it. And so I started getting Cyclone as of issue 5, I think, and got every issue. And then when it became Southern Squadron, I bought that, and then I bought Dark Nebula and Southern Cross and all that sort of stuff. So it definitely seems like there's a lot more comic making going on in Australia these days than there was back then.
Well, I collected a lot of those things that you're talking about now, those comic books and stuff too. They're in my collection. The creators of those characters from Cyclone and the other comic book characters that you mentioned will probably enjoy your commentary there, because they do, you know, like watch the show from time to time and pick it up and stuff like that. And I'm thankful that you enjoyed them, because a lot of those guys are friends, and I've touched base with them and stuff as well of late, and they're lovely people, man, and deserve their place, you know, like, because Australia's gone through some quiet times with their comic books. They had the boom, and then, as I can remember just from talking to them with their the history and the timeline, that mid-90s was really pumping. And then when you know, like that period where Image started, and they were, you know, like there was you know, 1 million, you know, like issue 1 started, because what do they call the prospector boom, you know, like, and then they got flooded,
speculator boom,
speculator boom, and then the news agents started slowing down on stocking them, and they became more specialized comic shops and that sort of thing. And a lot of the industry changed there, and I think you'll find varying ones went off to advertising and just wherever they could go. And there are a few comic books in Australia that plugged away through the, you know, the 2000s. Killaroo being one that I recall, and you know, obviously the Phantom chugged away, and there are a couple others that, you know, was going along. And then I guess with the advent of things like printing got cheaper, you know, back in those days, you had to do like 3,000-4,000 copies, you know, like to print something, where now you can do runs of 20, you know, like 50 and 100, you know, like it's whatever, you know, like the printing game has changed now. So there's a lot of advantages. You've got Kickstarters, which, I mean, if you essentially think about it, a Kickstarter to a certain extent, I mean, there's your distribution. Do you know what I mean? You've got people who bought them, so you're pushing it out. You're centralized. You're pushing it out to, you know, like your customers and things. It changes, man. Like you'd find with, you know, in the animation world with technology leaps. You know what I mean? Like there's this pad we'll use, and next year we're going to upgrade to this, and then there's that. And but you know, like you'd always be constantly, you know, like adjusting. I would assume.
Absolutely.
That's just. It's like, it's one of those things, man. I guess you adapt or you die, don't you? You know, it's one of those weird things. Well, mate, we'll wind down, and you know, like I don't really think I need to ask you a why, because I can tell by your passion tonight and the fact that the fire still burns, and you've set your little goals for yourself, and the universe seems to be nudging you along in directions for you to achieve those goals that you've had. For me, and meeting you today, I'm very grateful you've come onto the show, and I have had the opportunity to meet you today, man. And definitely stay in touch. And
Absolutely.
I hope to see Steamroller Man out and about and succeed and push on. And I certainly hope everyone watching, like the show, when it's broadcast, will check out steamrollerman.com too, and check out what Matt Schofield has done with himself with from what to me, mate, sounds like a very successful, pretty amazing career from a young Brisbane fella who bought his Cyclone comics and his Mighty Mouse, and and his man called Nova back in the day, and set his mind that he wanted to draw. So I would say you have had every success. So, Matt, on closing for the evening, mate, what would you say if you were sitting behind the desk at the San Diego Comic-Con and you had Steamroller Man there, and you had a young fella going through your prints, and his mum and dad came up to you and started talking to you about, oh, I've been wanting to do this comic book for a long time. Like, what should I do? What would you, in that moment, if roles were swapped, what would be your advice to that individual?
I think my advice would probably be very similar to the advice that John Boy Myers gave me, which was essentially, basically just do it. Like, my advice would be, if you want to make a comic, just start making a comic, and you'll learn how to do it by just doing it, trial and error. Don't wait until you've got the perfect story. Just jump in, just dive in, and don't do a lot of like pre-production artwork. Just draw it as you're making the comic, like design on the page, and just start, and you'll learn from that process whether you want to keep doing it, because it's comic making is a very, I've learned that I think it's one of the slowest ways to tell a story, because first you got to write it, then you got to lay out the page, then you got to pencil it, then you got to ink it, then you got to letter it, and then you've got one page. Now do that 50 times and you'll have a story, so it's like, if you're doing it all yourself, it's a very slow way to tell a story. And I think it's a particular sensibility and mindset that you need to want to do that and want to keep doing it. Like, I think some people think they want to do a comic, but then once they start, they're like, oh, it's too slow or whatever. And, that's cool. It's not for everybody, but you're never going to know unless you actually dive in and just do it. And that would be my advice, is just learn by doing. And as far as like how to get your work out there, do what I did. Like, the Facebook page method is so easy. Or just put it on Instagram. Like, tons of people do Instagram comics where they make their panel the same size as the Instagram square, and then they just do a panel each time. And that's eventually, when you make enough panels, you've got a whole story, and that's a perfectly legitimate way to get your comic out there these days too. So there's just so many more outlets to get your work out there, and a lot of them don't cost you anything except your time and effort. So yeah, I would say basically just dive in and do it while you've still got the enthusiasm for it, because it's the enthusiasm that's going to carry you further than anything else. So yeah, that'd be my
Absolutely.
advice.
I think that's lovely, Matt. I think that's very nice indeed. I've really enjoyed our chat today, man.
I have too, and I just want to say it's been great to meet you and talk to you. I think you're a very interesting soul, and you've got a good energy about you. So it's been good to spend time talking to you.
Thank you, Matt. So, man, I really appreciate that. It's much like my comic books. I have been a work in progress myself, mate, over the last couple of years. So I really do appreciate that those kind of words more than you realise, man. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I wish you every success, man. I really do. I'm going to keep a very close eye on Steamroller Man, and
thanks.
And I really do want people to check out Steamroller Man. So jump on the Facebook page, the website. Do all the likes, the followings, all of those sorts of things. Show the love for a fellow creator and someone that whose enthusiasm still burns. And I know there's people out there who'll be running around trying to watch bloody Simpsons cartoons and the Iron Giant over the next couple of weeks, mate, trying to see your name on there. Yeah, that dude. So, I got to meet Matt. So,
yeah, and apologies if we didn't talk enough about the Simpsons.
Well,
we just went where the conversation went. So
this is the Chinwag, man. This is the fluidity of the Chinwag. The flow, the sort of, just let go of the banks, man, and just see where the conversation and the topics take you. It's like, I think that's the best way to Chinwags can go.
I didn't mind it at all. I'm just thinking about like the audience, whether they would be watching, going like, he hardly talked about the Simpsons or something.
Matt, I think what we've discovered is that there is far more to you, mate, than just the Simpsons. So, I think there's a many-layered individual in there. And, if anyone has any letters of complaint that we didn't touch on the Simpsons enough, you can just send your emails to Shane, and I'll be sure to check my file once they come through to me in the next 15 or 20 years, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Anyway, it's all about fun, and it's been an excellent episode. All right, mate.
Yeah, this was really fun. So thanks very much, Lee. It was awesome.
That's all right. All right, my little mate Lloyd's even popped in to say good day to you, Matt. Hello.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's my little offsider. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching the pre-recorded Chinwag with Matt Schofield. I do hope that we, gave you as much as you wanted. For those people out there, that are shedding tears into their pot plants, you know what I mean? Like that we didn't talk about the Simpsons enough. That's just how it is. This is the Chinwag. This is fluid. And who knows, Matt and I had such a good conversation that, down the track somewhere, Matt is always welcome. So you may get your wish for more Simpsons somewhere down the track. The show is sponsored by the Comex Shop. Now, the Comex Shop has over 100 Australian independent comic book titles. Not all of them are produced by the Comex studio wing of the Comex network. So everyone is welcome to stock their comic books in the shop. It is a one-stop online shop. The distribution is from the head office. So you don't have to worry about orders coming to you and you worrying about mail orders and stuff like that. Once your comic is ordered, it will get sent out from the office. Now, for anyone wishing to buy comic books from the shop, there is a $9 postage flat rate. Now, that doesn't just mean one comic. That means 10, 20 comics as you want. Flat rate, $9. Anywhere you want to go. Internationally, a slightly different postage rates. Just send an email, ask questions for that, and I'm sure Shane will get back to you with all the information that you need. The show is also broadcast, as I said earlier, on across the Comex network and Aussieverse. Now, if you're watching on Aussieverse and you've heard of Comex, the Comex addresses are across the bottom of the screen in the yellow ticker box. So if you can go to those and like, follow, subscribe, click the bell, etc., to help the algorithms on any site you can find them, that would be wonderful. If you're watching on the Comex network and you've never heard of Aussieverse and their addresses are across the yellow ticker box across the bottom as well. If you can go to like, subscribe, the bells, press any button you can that doesn't set off an explosion would be handy. Because all of these things help the algorithms, and with the algorithms assistance, they go higher up the list. We get more content into your face. It allows more people like Matt and all the other guests we've had on Chinwag, the other shows that are broadcast across both networks, to get into your face and living room, and we share the stories of other creators and people associated and involved in the comic book community. So I would like to thank you very much for this evening. On a passing note, don't forget that kindness is the most important thing you can show another human being. It doesn't hurt if you haven't heard from someone, a family, a friend, one of your people, anyone, and you haven't heard from them for a long time. Mate, just send them a text. Give them a ring, because you might make their day, and you never know, it might make yours as well, because a text message and a phone call can change someone's life. All right, it's happened to me. I'm only here because of one of those things, and I'm very thankful to be here. Moving forward, as I said last week, thank you very much, and community is unity, and Chinwag will always be made with love. Thank you. See you next week.
This show is sponsored by the Comex Shop. Check out comex.cx for all things Comex and find out what Comex is all about. We hope you enjoy